Chelsea Johnson wiped the sweat from his brow as he eased into the driver's seat of his small, beaten-up Toyota. The hot and humid air of Wari clung to him, even as the evening breeze promised some relief. He had just finished a grueling shift at his job, and all he could think about was getting home to unwind. The streets were still busy, but the noise of the day had begun to die down, replaced by the more subdued sounds of a city winding down. He pressed the ignition button and began the drive home, his thoughts already wandering to the meal he would prepare for himself and the peace of his quiet apartment. As Chelsea navigated through the streets, he fished his phone out of his pocket and dialed his friend, Femi. It was a routine they had, catching up on the events of the day as they both made their way home. "Femi, my guy, how far? I just got off from work now. Being a lawyer is so hectic," Chelsea said, his voice carrying the familiar weariness of a long day. Femi laughed on the other end. "You complain too much, Chelsea. How many hours did you spend in the court today? Is it not 8 hours? And that 8 hours is a big problem. And another case has just been forwarded to me in preparation for next month." Chelsea rolled his eyes, adjusting his grip on the steering wheel as he turned onto a dimly lit street. The light from his dashboard glowed softly, casting a pale reflection on his youthful face. The street was unusually quiet, almost too quiet for Wari, but Chelsea was too engrossed in his conversation to notice. He didn't see the flashing red and blue lights in the distance, nor did he hear the muffled pops that punctuated the air. His mind was elsewhere, his focus on Femi's voice and the road ahead. "Femi, I heard my next case is about a dangerous and most wanted professional robber. I heard his name is Christian Ayomide," Chelsea continued, shaking his head as he approached a bend in the road. It was only when he rounded the corner that the scene before him finally registered. His heart lurched in his chest as his eyes took in the chaotic sight. Police cars, their lights flashing wildly, and the unmistakable sound of gunfire. "Femi, I'll call you back," Chelsea said hurriedly, dropping his phone into the passenger seat. Panic surged through him as he realized he had driven straight into the middle of a shootout. The blue and red lights danced ominously in the dark, and the staccato bursts of gunfire filled the air. His instincts screamed at him to reverse, to get out of there as quickly as possible, but just as he moved to put the car in reverse, a deafening bang rocked the car from behind. Chelsea's heart pounded in his ears as he turned to see what had happened. His eyes widened in horror as a man, tall and powerfully built, yanked open the driver's side door. The man was clad in black, a tight singlet that showcased his muscular ebony frame, black gloves, and a mask that obscured his face. But it was the gun in his hand, a cold, lethal weapon pointed directly at Chelsea's head that made his blood run cold. "Drive!" the man barked, his voice low and menacing. There was a thick Nigerian accent laced with something else. Authority. Danger. This was not a man to argue with. Chelsea froze, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. What? I say make you drive, or you want make I scatter your head for here." The man's voice was a growl, and Chelsea could feel the cold steel of the gun pressing against his temple. With trembling hands, Chelsea put the car into gear and sped away, his heart racing faster than the engine could rev. He could barely breathe as he stole a glance at the man beside him. The mask obscured his features, but his eyes, dark and cold, were visible, eyes that bore into Chelsea with a fierceness that left no room for negotiation. Where do you want me to go?" Chelsea stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Take me to your house," the man ordered, his tone brooking no argument. "My house? Why, do you want to die tonight?" The man's words were like ice, freezing any protest that might have risen in Chelsea's throat. Chelsea nodded shakily and took a turn onto the road leading to his apartment. His thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. How had he gone from a quiet drive home to this nightmare? He had no choice but to comply, his survival hinging on keeping this man calm. The drive to his apartment felt like an eternity, the tension in the car palpable. Chelsea could hear the police sirens in the distance, growing fainter as they sped away from the scene of the shootout. But he knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The man, whoever he was, wasn't going to let him go just because they were out of sight. When they finally pulled up outside Chelsea's apartment building, the man glanced around, his eyes sharp and alert. He seemed satisfied that there were no immediate threats and motioned for Chelsea to get out of the car. "Move!" the man commanded with the barrel of the gun, motioning for Chelsea to get out, and Chelsea obeyed, his legs feeling like jelly as he stepped out of the car. The compound was eerily quiet, the usual buzz of neighbors' conversations replaced by the oppressive silence of the night. There was power in the building, and the faint hum of the generator could be heard in the distance. The man pushed Chelsea toward the entrance, his gun never leaving Chelsea's side. "Open the door!" the man hissed when they reached Chelsea's apartment. With shaky hands, Chelsea fumbled with his keys, finally managing to unlock the door. He barely had time to step inside before the man shoved him roughly, causing him to stumble into the living room. The door slammed shut behind them with a finality that made Chelsea's stomach churn. "Sit down!" the man ordered, motioning to the couch with his gun. Chelsea collapsed onto the couch, his heart hammering in his chest. The man was silent for a moment, surveying the apartment with a critical eye. The neatness of the place seemed to surprise him. There was something almost amused in the way his eyes crinkled behind the mask. "Your house too clean," the man remarked, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I no expect make guy like you dey live for here." Chelsea said nothing, too terrified to respond. He just wanted this nightmare to be over, to wake up and find himself safe in his bed. But the cold reality of the situation was impossible to ignore. The man turned his attention back to Chelsea, his expression unreadable behind the mask. "Dem police go find us here," the man said almost to himself. Then, more forcefully, he added, "If dem show, no try anything stupid, you hear me?" Chelsea nodded frantically, the fear in his chest threatening to choke him. The man's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, before he turned and moved to the window, peering out cautiously. The minutes ticked by in tense silence until the sound of car doors slamming shut outside made Chelsea's blood run cold. He could see the shadows of the police officers moving toward the building, their flashlights sweeping across the compound. The man cursed under his breath and darted to the nearest curtain, ducking behind it just as there was a knock at the door. "Open the door!" the officer outside commanded. With trembling hands, Chelsea got up and unlocked the door, his heart thudding in his chest. Two police officers stood there, their eyes scanning the room behind him. "Good evening," Chelsea stammered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Can I help you?" "We saw your car enter this compound. Have you seen anyone suspicious?" one of the officers asked, his gaze sharp. "This man right here." He brought out a photograph of the criminal and showed it to Chelsea. Chelsea recognized him in a second. He was the same man who had just adopted him on his way home, the man hiding in his apartment. "No, officer," Chelsea lied, his voice shaking slightly. "It's just me here." The officer eyed him suspiciously. "Are you sure?" "What's your name?" "Chelsea Johnson," he replied, trying not to flinch under the man's scrutiny. The officer glanced at him, then back at the room. "All right, Mr. Johnson. If you see anything or anyone, you must inform us immediately." Chelsea nodded, and the officers finally stepped back, satisfied for the moment. Chelsea quickly shut the door, his heart still racing as he turned around. Ayomide, the man who had commandeered his home, emerged from his hiding place, his expression one of cold amusement. "So your name na really Chelsea Johnson," he said with a smirk, his voice laced with mockery. "You dey answer name way dem suppose give woman." Chelsea swallowed hard, too afraid to respond. Aomide moved closer, pulling out Chelsea's ID card from his pocket to verify the name. His eyes flicked over the card before returning to Chelsea, a smirk playing on his lips. Chelsea Johnson. "So you're a lawyer?" Aomide said, studying the card before tossing it back to Chelsea. "But now, you go make me dinner. I dey hungry, and you no go like see me vex." Chelsea's stomach churned with fear, but he nodded, knowing he had no choice. "All right," he whispered, leading the way to the kitchen. Chelsea blinked in confusion, struggling to process the shift in the man's demeanor. "What? Are you deaf?" the man snapped, waving the gun for emphasis. "I said I'm hungry. Go into the kitchen, go cook something, and don't try anything stupid." With the gun still trained on him, Chelsea slowly made his way into the kitchen, his mind spinning with fear and uncertainty. The robber followed closely, his eyes never leaving Chelsea's every move. As they entered the kitchen, Aomide looked around, his earlier amusement returning. "This place too clean. Nawa for you," he muttered, shaking his head. "So you cook often?" the man asked, his tone curious, but still edged with danger. Chelsea nodded silently, not trusting himself to speak. Chelsea focused on preparing the meal, his hands still trembling as he worked. He had no idea what was going to happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. His life had just been thrown into chaos, and there was no telling how it would all end. Soon, Chelsea finished preparing dinner, and Christian could no longer wait to eat, claiming he was starving. According to him, he hadn't had a proper meal in days because of his profession. Chelsea set the dining table, and without hesitation, Christian eagerly took a seat next to Chelsea, excited to finally taste the food. "Just from the aroma alone, I can tell it's going to be delicious," Christian Ayomide said, anticipating the meal. Chelsea served him a generous bowl of Nigerian jollof spaghetti mix with grilled turkey. Then Chelsea opened the refrigerator and brought out a chilled bottle of water and Chivita coconut and pineapple juice. Ayomide dove into the meal immediately, like a hungry lion. He couldn't stop praising Chelsea for the delicious dinner. Soon, both Chelsea and Ayomide were done eating. Chelsea cleared the dishes and washed them, while Ayomide sat there watching him. It was late, and Ayomide suggested Chelsea go to bed. However, Chelsea was too scared to sleep. Ayomide assured him, saying, "You're not my target, so I won't hurt you." Finally, they went to Chelsea's bedroom. Chelsea lay in bed while Ayomide sat on the couch in the room. A notification suddenly popped up on Ayomide's phone. A message. Ayomide stood up and walked over to Chelsea's bed, glancing at him while he slept. The message was from Ayomide's girlfriend, Pamela. They were exchanging loving text messages when another message came through. He opened it and was shocked to discover that the lawyer he was sent to kill was Chelsea Johnson, the very person sleeping in front of him. Ayomide pulled out his gun and aimed it at the sleeping Chelsea. Will Ayomide spare Chelsea Johnson, or will he complete his mission and leave the house?